G'day, welcome to Nevadia. Hi everyone, I probably shouldn't have made such a cheerful bloop bloop, but I have been practicing trying to get a little bit more sad ones to come, but they just don't. I'm just a cheerful person all around, evidently. So yes, I'm sorry about the terrible music. It's not particularly appropriate, and I will admit that. The reason why I am saying that is because a couple of weeks ago, my good friend Unholy Sarah, she released a video on abortion, and she did a really fantastic job. Links in the description below, obviously, because this will give a lot of context to this conversation that I am about to have. So yeah, it was on abortion, and she was quite well researched, but this is just some supplemental information that I thought that I would like to put towards her and her video, and just to sort of maybe bolster, I suppose, just give you a little bit more of an idea of what's happening both scientifically and legally that's happening around the world. So yeah, this is something more in my view, something I'm more interested in, but it's still very relevant to what she did. So mine's supplemental, so hers is more important. So go and check her out, obviously, if you haven't, and go definitely watch the video. So she talked a little bit about the heartbeat rule. So I wanted to have a quick chat about the heartbeat rule. If you don't know what that is, basically at 6 weeks, it is said that the heartbeat is able to be found in a 6-week-old fetus. So the problem with that is, first of all, the heart hasn't even started developing. It is sort of like flutters, basically, of the beginnings of the heart. It's not even the heart that has not even started developing. But something I wanted to add onto that is there is something called brain death. So why am I talking about brain death? Well, I will loop back, obviously, but right now I really would like you to, hear me out. Unfortunately, brain death is irreversible, and what happens is after a stroke or an aneurysm or a injury to the head, the neurons in the brain stop firing. It's a tragedy. It is really quite sad. But basically what that means is the body is still alive and is kept alive by life support systems, but the brain, the central nervous system, just doesn't work anymore. And it's really, really awful. But that is where people are considered to be dead, is when there is no activity being found in the brain. And the reason why it is the brain that is considered to be the point of death and not the heart is because as technology has improved and our resuscitation techniques have improved, heart stopping does not mean death because there's still neuronal activity happening in the brain. However, when there's no neuronal activity detected, that is at the point of death. So there's two types of brain deaths. You have complete brain death, where all of the central nervous system has stopped firing, or you have the cerebral brain death, which is where basically everything except the brainstem has stopped functioning. Brainstem basically controls your breathing, your autonomous kind of stuff that you don't think about from day to day. People who have died from brain death, especially the ones who have died from cerebral brain death, are actually really, really good candidates for organ donation. And the reason being is that doctors can keep the body alive and the heart going and the lungs pumping air through until the very last minute, where they can then harvest the organs. I hate saying harvest the organs, but that's the medical term. So why am I talking about this? Well, because of ethics, because of medical ethics, we can't now say that the time of death is where the heart has stopped. Because, as I said earlier, the heart can be restarted and then the person comes back and they're completely fine because their neuronal pathways, their neurons, their brain itself is completely fine. As soon as that stops functioning, that's when they die. Why am I talking about brain death? Because of the brain waves that determine if a person is alive, i.e. not at brain death, they don't actually start happening in the brain until 24 weeks of gestation. Before then, any movement or anything like that is actually random neuronal firing. If a person who has no brain activity and yet still has a beating heart is considered dead, then that is a really, really, really strong blow, in my opinion, and in medicine's opinion, that a fetus is not alive until 24 weeks of gestation. Yes, people will feel the baby kicking and they can see the baby blinking and smiling, but those are actual random neuronal firings according to science. I want to tell you a little bit about a reflex called the Lazarus reflex that happens in brain dead patients. So these people are dead. They have no neuronal activity. So I cannot emphasize that enough. These people are dead. And yet, due to this Lazarus reflex, which is the random firing of neurons in the body, what they do is they actually raise their arms and put it on their chest. I've left links to videos in the description below if you don't know what I'm talking about, or if you're a little bit morbidly interested, go and check it out. I saw a couple of videos and it's just kind of creepy, to be honest with you, in my opinion. It was kind of creepy. So that's one argument that is not talked about enough, in my opinion, in the pro-choice camp. So the 6-week heartbeat rule, in my opinion, and in a lot of pro-choice opinion, is that it is a very weak argument to say this is where the line is drawn for life. Because first of all, the heart that they find is not actually a developed heart. And also, second of all, the brain waves that are considered to mean that a person is alive do not occur until 24 weeks. Do what you will with that information, but in my opinion, it really, really severely weakens the argument that a fetus is alive at 6 weeks of age. Another thing that I've noticed about the abortion debate was touched on by Sarah in her video at 7 minutes and 27 seconds. She talked about a woman being arrested for having a miscarriage after being shot by another woman. And the reason why she was arrested for this miscarriage is because she got into a fight with this woman and she got shot, and that put her and her baby in endangerment. And then, of course, she miscarried. And she got released because being sent to jail for having a miscarriage is a massive miscarriage of justice, and that would never happen, right? Wrong, unfortunately. El Salvador has 0 exceptions for abortion, even if the fetus is killing the mother. If found guilty of having an abortion, a woman in El Salvador can be sent to jail for up to 30 years. On the 16th of February 2019, a woman in El Salvador was released after having miscarriage. And yes, you heard correctly, that was 2019. That happened in February this year, that this woman was released from jail for having a miscarriage. Her name was Evelyn Hernandez Cruz. She was 20 years old and she had served 3 years of her sentence. In 2016, she went to the toilet and gave birth to a baby that she didn't know that she was pregnant with, and then subsequently passed out due to a loss of blood. She was placed under arrest for, and get this, murdering her child because she didn't have antenatal care. She was a poor woman in a third world country who lived in a rural area, and she had said many times during her trial that she would have gone to see a doctor had she known she was pregnant. During this trial, medical experts did say that they could not tell whether she had given birth to a live child or a dead one. To make matters worse, during her trial she had said that she'd been repeatedly raped by a man who was also a part of a local gang, so she was terrified to talk out against him. Although she was in her 3rd trimester, she did not actually know that she was pregnant. And actually that happens because it is rare. However, women have not known that they were pregnant until up to when they give birth. She was just feeling a bit sick, like she just put it down to feeling a bit crappy, and she was still having what she thought was her menstrual blood. However, being repeatedly raped also causes damage to the genitalia area, which can obviously bleed. So maybe what she thought was her menstruation might have actually been because of damage done to her by her rapist. However, the judge didn't believe her and sent her to 30 years in jail. So that was Evelyn. Now I want to talk to you about another woman from El Salvador called Carmen Guadalupe Vasquez Aldana, and she was jailed for having another miscarriage. She was 17 years old and she had been raped by the neighbor of her employer. She had to work up until when she was due. She started bleeding heavily after giving birth and her baby died, and she was not allowed to go and seek medical assistance. However, when she continued to bleed, her employer took her to the hospital because, and I quote, she didn't want a second person to die in her house. So Carmen then woke up in her hospital bed, handcuffed, and couldn't explain what happened and ended up getting 30 years in jail. She was able to be released and she was one of the lucky ones. There are several women who are in El Salvador who are currently in jail because of miscarriages. As of the 7th of March 2019, the BBC reported that dozens of women are actually in jail in El Salvador because of miscarriages. Amnesty International said on the 23rd of April 2018, there are at least 23 women in jail for having a miscarriage. I know I'm only talking about El Salvador and this is anecdotal evidence. However, I kind of want you to also maybe think of this more as a case study to show what can happen in a country that has extremely restrictive abortion laws. A fairly reasonable counter-argument to what I'm saying is that the US is a more developed country and it's, you wouldn't see that happening in America, would you? Right? Wrong. Unfortunately, wrong. I have been able to find cases of women being jailed for miscarriages from as early as 2011, and I didn't stop looking. There's more, probably going back further and probably closer to the dates than what I'm going to explain to you. For example, you've got Rennie Gibbs. Rennie Gibbs was a 15-year-old African-American girl who was raped because she was not of the age of consent. She was charged with depraved heart murder of her child. Gibbs, at 15 years of age, gave birth at 36 weeks in December 2006. It was discovered that at the time she had a cocaine habit, and even though medical experts said that her cocaine habit had nothing to do with the miscarriage of her child because there was no cocaine in the child's body, she was still arrested for heart-depraved murder. The saddest thing is that this baby had the umbilical cord wrapped around its neck, which causes miscarriages, and there is nothing that she could have done to have prevented that, as far as I'm aware. So this is a girl who, as I said, was raped at 15 years of age because she was under the age of consent, who just had a miscarriage, who was a cocaine addict, being threatened with life behind bars. Thankfully, in 2014, her case was thrown out of court by a Mississippi judge. I was unable to find out if she had served jail time, but I am assuming that she did. In 2011, Bei Bei Shuai, a Chinese immigrant, was sentenced to jail in Indiana for murder and attempted feticide after trying to commit suicide. She was 33 weeks pregnant and her boyfriend and the father of her child dumped her, and she became so depressed she tried to kill herself by eating rat poison. Thankfully, she survived, but her daughter, who she later called Angel, died 2 days after having an emergency C-section. Rather than showing compassion for a woman who obviously was in extreme emotional distress, the Indiana prosecutors threw the book at her and tried to charge her for up to 45 years in jail. Her murder charge was later downgraded to a misdemeanor charge of criminal recklessness, and she was released because of time served, because she spent 435 days in jail. She was prosecuted under a 1979 law which protected the fetus of a woman from violent acts such as an abusive partner or a drunk driver. However, more and more experiences from more and more women have shown that they are being prosecuted under this law. Purvi Patel was an American Indian woman who was given a 20-year sentence for the miscarriage of her child. In July in 2013, she gave birth to a premature boy in her bathroom. She then later wrapped it up and threw it in the bin and went and got medical treatment. She admitted to her doctors that she'd given birth because there was obviously evidence of her giving birth. So they went and found the baby in the bin. I know it seems really, really heartless that a mother would throw her baby in the bin, but she had conversations with her friend saying that she didn't want this baby. And because of these conversations and the fact that she'd ordered a drug online to try and have an abortion, which is illegal in Indiana, she was charged with feticide and child neglect, which makes no sense because if you give birth to a fetus that did not survive, you can't have caused this child to have died due to your lack of action because the child was not actually alive. It didn't make any sense. The defense pathologist said that the baby was around 23 to 24 weeks gestation, which means that the lungs were not developed enough for the baby to have been able to survive. On the other hand, the prosecution pathologist said the baby was at least 25 to 30 weeks of age, which means the lungs would have been able to have supported the baby. The prosecutors used a highly discredited method of determining if the baby was alive by using what's called the lung float test. And basically the idea is that if the baby had breathed in, meant that the lungs would be able to float on water. However, it was thoroughly discredited by experts all over the world because of the amount of false positives. Unfortunately, the jury said that Patel was guilty and therefore she was sentenced to 20 years in jail. This happened in March 2015. This was 4 years ago. On April the 22nd, 2015, Patel obviously went, hey, this is not cool, I'm going to appeal, and thankfully it was overturned and she was released September the 1st, 2016. So she spent over a year of her life in jail for having a miscarriage in Indiana, America. So here's a few notable mentions. Amanda Kimbrough, she had a diagnosis of a Down syndrome baby as a mother, and she actually wanted to keep the baby. However, unfortunately, she had to have an emergency C-section where the baby devastatingly died 19 minutes after birth. She was later charged with chemical endangerment of her baby, and that didn't make any sense to her because she had never taken drugs. Christine Taylor was also charged with attempted fetal homicide after falling down some stairs while arguing with her then husband. Elizabeth Dominguez failed a drug test when she had eaten a poppy seed bagel earlier the day that she gave birth. Of course, poppy seeds have a little bit of opiates. So when she gave birth, they had tested her urine and she was arrested for child endangerment, and she had the Child Protection Services threaten to take her children off her for eating a bagel. Unfortunately, as I said, the more I looked, the more I saw, and I went down quite a bit of a rabbit hole. I'm sure I haven't even scraped the surface. This is not okay. It is not okay to arrest someone for having a purely natural and very devastating experience of losing a child. It is so sad and incredible to think that the US, one of the OECD countries, are arresting and putting women in jail for having a miscarriage. This is why we need permissive abortion laws to stop these stories from happening. As I said, this is just supplemental information that I thought needed to be talked about alongside with Sarah's video. Go check out her channel. She's absolutely hilarious and I love her to bits. She makes incredible content. So yeah, definitely while you're there, check out other stuff that she does and subscribe to her. And while you're at it, subscribe to me if you haven't. I'm so sorry for having such a really depressing conversation, but unfortunately we need to have this conversation. Anyway, in the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful day, evening, whatever that you're doing, and don't forget, don't give yourself the raw prawn. I also want to do a special thank you to my patrons, especially my highest tiered patrons, Ms. Nunya and Aided Furball. Thank you very much for your support. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you, and I love you all.